So, how many here can say that they know exactly what the Bologna process is? It has hardly been reported in media, and it has not been a matter of thorough parliamentary discussion. The Bologna Declaration was issued on the 19th of June 1999 by the joint ministers of education of the EU countries. Norway, although not a member of EU, also signed. All in all, the Bologna Declaration calls for the integration of all the national systems of higher education in the EU into one European educational system with the major aim of increasing its international competitiveness. In order to achieve these goals, the basic structures of the national systems must be made uniform, with the same cycles and degrees, and last but not least, the same mechanisms of control of the faculty. When presented with the idea of the Bologna process, or Accords, in Norway, we always hear about the streamlining and compatibility of courses and study point systems and degrees. But the totality of the implications of the Bologna Accords is much more far-reaching. Small and large protests, like the one we saw in the beginning, are going on all through Europe in the countries now most severely affected by the changes.
We are talking about the process towards an integrated free market of education. And as we soon shall see, free marketism here, as well as in all other spheres in society, includes privatization of common goods and corporate governance, the so-called new public administration. The foundation for the Bologna process is the World Trade Organization, the WTO. As a branch of WTO, we find GATS, the General Agreement on Trade in Services. The free trade principles of WTO are applied in the field of education as defined by GATS as one service among others, along with utilities like energy, water supply, healthcare, housing, and social security. That is domains that used to be seen as the core of the public sector in Europe. Well known to the protesters all over the world, the WTO and GATS are basically working for eroding all effective forms of democratic political control, trying to turn the final word to international courts appointed by the very same organizations. Higher education, instead of being the right of citizens of nation states laid down by law, is being transformed into a commodity, sold and bought from any international provider.
We can already observe changes that has come as a result of the Accords. As all students experience, study time has been reduced. This must be seen mainly as a cost cut for all the governments, since it in no way produces more clever students, and it functions counterproductive to the idea of moving between different countries' institutions during BA and MA. The students are being rushed through curricula, leaving MA as the only real value education. Power has been taken away from small democratic entities like the board in the academy and moved to the top of the organization, laconically called the matrix organization. All over, business-minded leaderships take control and run the institutions as corporations. They are not cost-efficient because they simply employ too much administration, which is a common phenomenon when merging into large institutions, also a common denominator of the Bologna process. The new Norwegian university law has changed the board structures. They are now dominated by external representatives appointed by the ministry, supposedly to represent societal interests, but mainly representing the interests of the ministry and corporations. The same control systems through so-called quality control in Norway, NOKUT, is applied everywhere. A quality assurance that has certain standards for, among other things, evaluating the work of people that supposedly should have the highest standards of qualifications.
A system of quantification of achievements, like the production of study points and the amount of valid research, indicates how much money an institution will receive. This money comes with certain bonds, for instance, the duty to make cooperative projects with businesses. Because of the obvious democratic and academic problems these changes produce, we should not be naive and think that it is not the actual intention of the Bologna process. We experience the exact, efficient ways of shortcutting the influence and growth of grassroots democracy. Think it over. Since mass education became mainstream, universities have been the main power centers for protest movements in Europe. Now, as institutions all over Europe are being privatized, student fees are being introduced in country after country. Maybe the occupations and protests we see are the last spasms of that specific radical culture. Neoliberal governments control the majority of the European countries. Nicolas Sarkozy, Gordon Brown, Silvio Berlusconi, Angela Merkel, and so on. They have no reasons for wanting neither public participation nor public control. In this respect, Norway is special, but for how long?
Totally evading journalistic scrutiny in our part of Europe, there have been intense lobbying in the most powerful regions to push for this change of the education systems in Europe, in order not only to privatize and control the educations, but to actively shape the future job market of Europe as well. For corporate employers, there is only one profitable form of employment, namely precarious work. Midlertidig ansettelse. Through precarious work, it is still possible to evade unions. And no unions means reduced power to the workers, reduced wages, worsened working conditions, and no job security. In addition, we have the everlasting threat of workers' surplus. There is always a cheaper place to move production. It is in this context we have to understand lifelong learning. It is connected to the flexible worker, the worker that has to be re-educated all the time, because he changes work all the time. And with the privatization of education, somebody will even earn money on this struggle. The news speak of the marvelous flexible worker, and the concept of lifelong learning is carefully constructed rhetorics.
The world's most international media company, with more than 100,000 employees, 5 divisions and locations in more than 50 countries.
Curious? Then have a look at createyourowncareer.de or createyourowncareer.com.
Insgesamt sind Medien schon da und nur dann erfolgreich, wenn sie auch letztlich eine kreative Basis haben. Deswegen sage ich, bei aller Strategienotwendigkeit, bei allem Zahlenverständnis, das man haben muss, ohne Kreativität geht es nicht.
Bertelsmann Group, with its sensitive Nazi past, is the #1 media conglomerate and leading publishing house and employer of precarious work in Europe. It is the main driving force and think tank that has, in practice, forced the idea of the Bologna Accords through their more neutrally sounding affiliate CHE. As anyone who studies internal affairs of the EU Commission knows, corporate lobbying is its driving force. The reason why we in Norway don't know about these facts are the fact that the news are controlled by the driving forces behind the process. And as we all should be aware of, Norwegian media seldom do their own investigative journalism. They mainly cut and paste the official headline stories of corporate media conglomerates. So the spectacle manifests itself as an enormous positivity, out of reach and beyond dispute. And news is the poetry of power.
Kiel is nothing more than the realization of a ministerial idea of art education. The goal is not primarily to educate great artists, because they have no knowledge or interest in artists as such. It is to educate people for the creative industries, to achieve a closer relationship between art, theatre, dance, design on one side, and commercial media, marketing and businesses on the other. They forced these changes upon institutions that thought they were protected by agreements in the parliament. But the entire art environment severely underestimates the power arrogance of the ministries and the parliamentarians' endless tolerance towards the lack of control on ministerial processes. In a world where only what's countable counts, also the art education must be countable. There is no more logic to it than that.
So why were we not able to resist these changes that were followed by so few arguments? It is the saddest learning experience I have ever had. NBK, the Union of Artists, were latecomers in the fight and thought they never really did. Just as they are not fighting for any true improvement of artists' rights today. The teachers of the academy never went on strike. The students were not willing to go on strike either. And when proposing occupation, I felt too alone to carry it out. Artists cannot be comfortable just waging media wars without organizing a fight as well. When I started my MA at the Art Academy, it was pure chaos. There were no students present in the collegium meetings. No decisions or votations were written down on paper. The allmøte, plenum meeting, was rarely gathered, and no decisions were made in them. The student council was not operative, and so on. So the total lack of organizational measures made it impossible to join in an organized resistance. We tried to change this, but the grim fact of the Art Academy is that there are too few students and teachers willing to do political work, even when it concerns the future of art in Norway. And a great many are simply fueled by egotism. Now it looks bleak in a way. Soon the Academy is moving into the factory of art, or the temple of art, quoting the previous Minister of Knowledge, Johanna. There the Academy will meet the somewhat bizarre culture of art management that dominates Kiel, and be subjected to this culture in a far greater degree than it has up to now. What will the effect be? total havoc, war and vandalism, or the slow devitalization of an academy turning art school? Let's get back to the idea of an ideal academy. When the academy organizes itself around vital discussions of art and its connection to society, it can in turn actively provoke the restructuring of Kio. I'm not thinking about endless meetings in the Kio administration or mingling in the mingling area, but an awareness that the academy could represent the core idea of education as such. We followed up with sincerity by both teachers and students in a system of unleveled participation. The academy embodies such a strong and radical idea that it will threaten to change the system from within.
Maybe artists educated at the academy can take on the big issues in Norwegian politics that so seldom are being addressed in the public. The Norwegian hypocrisy in climate issues, when climate change is caused mainly by the oil economy. The Norwegian oil economy selling expensively to the poorest countries in the world, in effect keeping them poor, while trying to maintain the image of a country helping the poor. Norwegian business participation in global capitalism. The oil fund investing in some of the worst corporations in the world. Norwegian participation in imperialist warfare, while trying to maintain a picture of being a peace nation. Reserving $1 billion for the war in Afghanistan on the new budget. Norwegian war profiteering. The government's politics on refugees that come from the worst afflicted eras in the world, among other things sending them back to impossible conditions and sometimes even death. And what about the educational system? When the neoliberals are turning everything into commodities, maybe an artist-controlled academy is something worth fighting for. That is our hope. Thanks.
I think we open up for some questions. Responses. Anybody there?
I think that you sound a little too pessimistic concerning the actual benefits from the struggle there in the academy in the last years. For example, I mean, the word academy wouldn't even be used if it wasn't for the students actually fighting. So I think that there were a lot of victories in that struggle, which is important to actually conclude.
Yeah, I recognize that, of course. My point was why we didn't win the actual struggle of getting our faculty and keeping outside the Kio structure.
What kind of things did you win then?
I think that, first of all, I mean, the plans were to actually demolish the whole academy structure, and basically there were a lot of kind of, I mean, the Department of Education and the leadership of Kio had to make agreements that were in favor of the students. I mean, it was not a complete victory, but I mean, there were really big victories in that situation where the plans were actually to dismantle the whole academy and to merge the Kunsthåndverksskolan and Kunstakademiet. And I think that one of the lessons is that the students, I mean, there were some students fighting at Kunsthåndverksskolan and they did a good job, but they were not able to mass mobilize. And I think that the reason that there were some important victories here were the fact that there is some mass mobilization. So I'm not as pessimistic as Marius is.
Now, I'm sorry if I seem very pessimistic when it comes to what we achieved. I think you're right in those cases, but I think that what I'm not pessimistic. I'm critical because I'm quite positive that we actually could have won some of the most important battles, and this that you're describing is of course very important, but they were not the main battles we could have won. And my point being that if we really want to win or be kind of on the progressive side and not only keeping the academy without really being able to evolve it like we could if it was artist run, then I don't think we will win in the long run. I can't see that it will happen because it's a trend that we are only fighting to keep kind of privileges and not to get any as artists generally in society as well. And that's not pessimist, I think it's realist.
I heard that there were something happening downstairs afterwards, so if people want to sort of think about it, we will hang out and we can continue discussing it. If there are not any more comments or questions. But feel free, we have a lot of time.
But how do you see, like, we have problems with students not participating in the SU even, or what should we do about it? I mean, why don't we care?
Why don't we care? No?
Yeah, why don't we care? Or why don't we? What should I do to get us to start moving into Kiev? Because obviously we don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, it's difficult to. I really see that it's difficult to work against going into Kiev now. I think for students to participate in student organization and so on, I think they have to realize the importance of the relevance of the work. Because I think one of the things that we have tried to demonstrate here is the actual link between art history and artists being active, politically active, and engaging in society. And I think the student council could be. I mean, not if it's bureaucratic and only paperwork, but it could be a really progressive place to both discuss political issues, but also to work with organizational inside the institution to combine. I think that's one idea on how to vitalize it. But that depends on how I mean the academy. If it's possible, we can live, because if you get some money, you can always organize something. But if you're always on the straitjacket, it's much more difficult. So I think one of the really important things that were before that was that the students had some money always to organize activity. And then the student council actually was a place where you could work from with organizing activity. Like when I went to the academy the first time, because I was both diploma and MA, was some of us applied to do festival. We got money, so we started Peep Show. That also actually came out partly from the student council. So I think artists have to see the link between political reality, the political reality of the world and their art. And I think it's one of the best places to start, because if you're able to build an academy at the academy, you're also able to build an academy after you get out of the academy. Because it's, I think an academy in the real sense is much more, you know, it's not only for kids, it's for all age groups, all artists.
To me, it's a little abstract. In what ways what will be changed when we move to Kyiv? Like when we move to Zwaig. For example, the art being produced. How do you see? In what ways will the art being produced at the academy change, and will it necessarily change, or is it just the democratic issues will change?
I think it's impossible to say if the art will change, but I think the most difficult thing that I've been there a lot, because I've been working with some people at the stage part of the Kyiv as well, and it's a monoculture. So they don't treat their students there as the kind of individual subjects that you try to form or help in this way or this way. It's much hierarchical system, top-down system, even towards students. So that I think the most challenging thing would be to operate within a school that has that kind of culture. That will be the most challenging. And it's on every level. So I think all the frustration that people here have gone through when trying to cooperate with administration and so on, even getting equipment. You know, I don't know if you know the past there. I don't know how it works now, but it has been a farce. I think it will be a really bad struggle to move this kind of academy structure that we're trying to keep over to a place where it's really almost videregående skole view on students. But what it will produce, I don't know. I hope that the academy will then almost take over because it's so much more valued as an educational system. Then people has to be active to be able to provoke that change.
Just a comment. We're losing our school galleries. We're losing our school galleries. We don't have any school galleries as of next year, for instance. That's one change.
Yeah, they haven't gotten, because I was trying to understand the drawings of the building, but they never finished them. So, and it's still not finished. Are they?
No.
Yeah. So, well, if you if you fight for it, probably you will get it. But that's what it's about.
I mean, I've been talking to the administration, and I don't feel like it's the students that are in the center of this discussion at all.
No.
But in some sense, that's like where we have to put ourselves. There's no one else going to put us there if they don't care. We have to be the center and take place.
Yeah. So now we know we don't have to do boundaries.
No. I mean, studio places and everything's. We have to like take what we want and point out what we want if we are going to get it. There's like, we're grown ups.
I think that's really important what you said, because what we see in the whole Europe with the Bologna process, the administrations and the organizations are getting sort of bigger and bigger, and it's more and more directed from the top. And Kyiv is